composed by Ulis Rocha from Brazil. Ulis, you are welcome. Ulis is from the Center for Higher Education for Conscientiology from Brazil, and he's going to entertain us on the consciousness and re-urbanization. Where is the focus of changes? And the second one will be from Ms. Zheng Yvonne from Tonji University. The question that we will ask us is China building Africa? And of course, there are people that are very, very interested to answer to that question or to ask questions after the presentation. And then we have Tonton Mundele from Peking University. Tonton, you're welcome. And Tonton is going to ask urbanization in Africa, lessons from China. That will be your topic. Thank you very much. And last but not least, we have Matundu Lelo from the University of Quebec in Montréal, who come. Il va poser la question des stratégies et politiques d'urbanisation durable en Afrique, impact de l'implication chinoise et canadienne dans les actions de développement en Afrique. So we're all set. We give you each of you for 15 minutes of presentation, and then at the end we're going to have about 10 to 15 minutes of questions from the panel. If that is agreed, I would like to call Ulis on the floor to start the debate. Thank you, Ulis. You have the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for the opportunity for being here talking to you. It's really a nice pleasure and really a great opportunity. Well, I'm very conscious about the situation where the subject brought here may be very different for you. I may understand if some of you consider it even not appropriate, maybe. But we will try to present an approach about consciousness, how to introduce consciousness in the discussion of urbanization. Yes, let's see. So, I live in Brazil, in Iccasu Falls. I came from an independent center of research. Our subject is consciousness. We think that it's the most important thing in the universe for us to study, because it refers to our own selves. Well, when I mean consciousness, it means not the state of being aware, but it's a synonym of soul, spirit, self. I'm referring to our own beings, myself, yourselves. Okay? Well, this message here is a philosophical principle because I intend to speak to you about psychical phenomena. And it's very important that people can use the critical sense. Really, it's much better to talk with skeptical people than people who can be easily influenced by any idea. So keep your mind active, all right?
Thank you.
And we give a lot of value to experience. This is a very important epistemological basis. We don't work with imagination or fantasy, nothing like that. If we are going to talk about psychical phenomena, it's important. If someone is interested in it, that you should try to develop techniques and have your own experience. Nothing about belief or imagination, nothing about that. Okay?
Thank you.
Well,
We are not going even to believe you.
no, don't believe. Just that information.
Mm-hmm.
This is my city. An image from the waterfalls. We have a campus there. This is a hotel, a new hotel. These are places where people live. The research campus is here. Here. This is a kind of auditorium. Inside, it's like this. We have lectures every day. We are now working to build an encyclopedia every day in time of lunch. a topic of the encyclopedia is presented there and discussed every day, and you can access it online, right? Well, this is a very short view about our subject today. Consciousness. We're trying to make science about it. It's very, very hard because conventional science methodology is not appropriate. We don't have apparatus, we don't have machines to study our inner world. So the machine is our own selves, is myself. My own consciousness is the machine that I use to study myself. We use the expression self-research. We may use introspection. We don't have so far any other resource. If we have, we would accept it, but we don't have so far. Mm-hmm. And the main experiences are psychical phenomena. And there is a few of them very important. And the main phenomena that we try to develop is the out-of-body experience. Of course, we know that science has no way to prove that it exists, but also there is no way to prove that it does not exist. We have a lot of reports from every part of the world along the history, and people with reporting experiences, and it's very, it's possible for any one of you to develop techniques to have this experience. You may work in laboratories, in your house, anywhere, it's possible. We are now working in new methodologies. In truth, it is not so new because we have a lot of literature in the world in different lines of knowledge, even in religion, mysticism. But we are working, looking for to make science. This is our goal. And if it's possible to have an out-of-body experience, a lot of changes may occur with the person. Mainly the responsibility for new knowledges, especially ethical knowledges, because we got a lot of information about our own selves and about other people. For instance, about the cities too. And here we will begin to make relation with the process urbanization. This process is very important because we try to use the psychical abilities to help people. So if you want to help people, we may think in an ethical way. That's it. To build this proposition, I tried to make it more concrete in this book. This is a dictionary about the physiology of the psychical phenomena. I presented this work last July in Helsinki in the congress, that's in the conference that's named Toward a Science of Consciousness. It exists already for 21 years. It began in the University of Arizona, and there they worked very hard to develop hypotheses and develop experiments. Well, and many universities of the world are working together to try to solve this problem of consciousness. When I say about a paraphenomenological methodology, it's not to prove something, but it's a way to offer an educational process in such a way that the person will have resources to develop experiments by himself and to see if something happens or not. This is the resource we have now. I may talk to you a little bit about the theory of extra-physical reurbanization. This is maybe the most strange conception for you, and I ask you to be calm and You don't need to call an ambulance to take me to the psychiatric hospital. I know what I'm saying, but the subject is really, I know that's really a lot of different to you. What is this? Extra-physical para-reorganization. When a person leaves the body with lucidity, it's possible to see what happens after our body dies. It's possible to see and to talk with other people. And we observe what's going on, for instance, near slums. When a person is preparing to rebirth consciousness, it's a very hard condition to do it. So this consciousness, we call it an extra-physical consciousness. It must be prepared to move from an extra-physical place to another one, to be prepared to rebirth. If we make analogy with our physical world, the same may happen. It's very hard to take a person and to change the place where this person lives suddenly. You must prepare the person for that. So we have the conception that the process of urbanization begins inside each one of us. For instance, if you love a person, if you want this person to live together with you in your house, what you have to do? You just go there, pick that person and take to your house, suddenly, it's easy. If you look, if you get acquainted to a person by the first time, by the first second, you take that person and take to your house, of course not, it takes time. It takes understanding, acquaintance, knowledge. So this person will shift the place where he lives. And this shift requires a lot of attention, a lot of comprehension, a lot of dialogue. Only one person to decide to change her house. You see, only imagine a population. It's not easy. It's not easy. And we see it's possible to observe all this difficulty in the extra-physical dimension. It's the same, and it requires attention. Well, it's okay so far? I understand what you're maybe thinking. We are now, when I say we are now, I mean that in Brazil, we have a community about 1,000 people. People from all around the world. We have people from New Zealand, and from Russia, from everywhere. Engineers, architects, lawyers, judges. Anyone who get interest in that can move to there. But we have also a lot of people around the world, in universities, and we are creating a network to discuss the problem. And not only in the research, in the center of research where I work, we are really discussing the problem. It's a full new problem to discuss in our world. A few decades ago, or a century ago, maybe if I talk in this way, I should be killed. You understand? So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you, and I hope that I will stay alive here. Yes? Yes? So, we have right now a very interesting work in Africa. We have a group about 15 people that is now beginning contact with universities and exchanging books and lectures there about this idea. So why this is important? The basic idea that I would like to bring to you is about the possibility of increasing perception. Okay? Think about you, the attention that you are giving to each other right now. It's much different from the attention that a mother gives to her baby. When a person gives attention to other person, the quality of perception changes a lot. What I want to say is that it's quite possible to develop perception in levels uncommon, not common for human beings. The quality of perception may increase a lot. I'm talking about extrasensorial perception. This can be developed with attention, with exercises, okay? And maybe for you all, if you are interested, if anyone is interested in this kind of subject, you may develop those abilities too. I'd like to show you, just to, the time, please.
You have 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay, thank you. Well, let me put here some illustration about the epistemological basis of the subject here. Well, this is what we call mechanism of discoincidence. This explains what happens because the possibilities of perception of the human body are lower than the extra-physical body. Our perception may increase if we learn to promote this coincidence and how to make it. Here are basic skills. At first, develop physical relaxation. In daily life, we may find a person tense or another person more relaxed. My attention is better, so you see, I can pay attention to other one. Another skill, to identify what we call personal bioenergies. It's a kind of substance that you may pay attention and discover that you can create movement with it. And the substance is responsible to liberate the mechanism of discoincidence. And then, to initiate the control of the mechanism of discoincidence. If you do that, this kind of situation may happen, mainly in the human head. Here, we have a big discoincidence. But if you are able just to relax a little bit your head, your perceptions may change. Of course, this doesn't happen suddenly. You must, I don't know, it depends from each one. Some people may get it by the first time. Other people, it takes 1 year or 2 years or more. I'm not able to run 42 kilometers, a marathon right now. But if I prepare myself, after a few years, I will get. So it needs preparation. Well, let me try to enter now our subject here. Is it a choice to put the focus on consciousness in our subject of urbanization? Why? In general, urbanization process shifts the person from one place to another. We talked about this. Or it changes the quality of the environment around the person. It's a very simple idea. And then, the urbanization and the inner process of changing. In both cases, right, it depends on the changes possible to be made in the inner world of the person. We are here talking all the time about technical aspects, right? Mm-hmm. I saw the Chinese presentations. You are technically brilliant, but we saw some questions that rise in this situation. Well, how do you treat people during the process of urbanization? I wrote some questions that I heard here. They're here. Well, Professor John Barnett, he said, yes, it's easy to plan a city, but it's not easy to all the people agree with you. Remember that? Mm-hmm. He said it yesterday. It's very interesting. A woman said yesterday too, a question is, what do you do when the government official doesn't trust your model? And we got an answer. Yeah. They even tried to control the model. And Mr. Badian said, you have to engage the government official. Okay, but what kind of consciousness is that, this official? What kind of consciousness is the planner? Here we have just an speculative profile of kinds of persons. If this official from the government is a sociopath, you may be engaged with him, or you may try to change the situation. How can you decide that? You must develop your perception about other person, because if not, things will not go right. So I'm trying to put the problem of consciousness and perception about the other consciousness in the center of the process. If you have all the technical conditions, but if you do not perceive the other consciousness, things will not work. Do you agree or not about this?
Do we have to?
I don't know. But here, you see, we have a growing scale in this. If you are able to develop yourself as a cosmophysiological leader, and if you're trying to help other leaders, you may work as a helper. Somebody with a better perception is very different from other conditions. So your lucidity, your perception here is growing. Hypothesis. Good leaders could use potential of lucidity, talking about perception, above average, but even though without technical self-knowledge to continue increasing this ability to perceive other people. So if you take your own perception, your own consciousness as an object of development, you may continue developing yourself. See, it's different if you stay in the same level your whole life. Okay? Examples here. A lot of professions can use those abilities. I studied in the Soviet Union by the time of Leonid Brezhnev, and I had contact there with astronauts. The military, they develop psychical phenomena in laboratories. There are programs of the government. I know policemen that use those abilities to help people, to find people, you see. For those who have not interest in developing those abilities, it seems to be crazy. But if you try, you will see that something happens. Well, I have talked about this, yeah, but here we have a few topics, very interesting. The idea of consensual para-urbanization is basically the process of changing one consciousness from one extra-physical ambience to another with the purpose of preparation for the next intraphysical life. And what happens? A lot of social illness before the person rebirth. And if you study this situation like a geographical, para-geographical, social economical problem, you will begin to create new hypotheses to problems we are facing right now. Why those people is rebirthing in that place? Why this is happening? It's possible to observe. This is not imagination. You should try to use a high level of perception to understand this. Okay? Thank you. Well, benefits of expansion of lucidity. It helps to detect hidden and radical traits of individuals and communities. What means? You may be speaking to a person and he is a psychopath. And those kind of people, they know how to be kind to you. You see, if you are not trained to detect those kind of persons, it's very hard. And also, in the opposite situation, you may find someone great, brilliant, and if you don't pay attention to that person, you will lose someone in the same way. So if you work with your perception, you may be a leader that will be able to gather a better team, right? And to detect people who you should help, all right? And here we have other benefits, okay? And to probe and understanding the psychical phenomena in yourself and in other people. For me, it's not so difficult. We look to other people and we feel who is more sensitive. We learn that. You see? We may be able to detect the sensitiveness in other people too. It helps to detect and understand necessities of individuals, groups, even when the other one doesn't recognize it. Do you think this is useful if you have problem with urbanization? You see? Because if you put the consciousness in the center, your abilities are very important for that. Well, it helps better understanding in general. Better understanding, discernment, lucidity. It helps you to decide when to act and when not to act. This is very simple, but maybe one of the main decisions we may have. All right? Okay. I think that my time is close. It's close. Thank you for the opportunity.
This is amazing. Absolutely amazing. I think this is the new knowledge that Luis is trying to invite us to go beyond.
Just one point. I gave him this book as a present. It's a book that talks about Homo sapiens urbanizatus. It's about the consciousness who may require help. It's a kind of diagnosis that we may find in the extraphysical dimension. It's full of data. But let's see, it's written in Portuguese.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions that will be asked to you when we start the discussion on this one. You represent the level. Oui, mais c'est toi. C'est à toi maintenant. Ouais. No, this is yeah, okay, say it. Okay, so thank you very much. We're going now to turn to Zhang Huang from Tonji University. Are you ready?
Thank you, Chair.
Tony, you have the floor. Yes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. So my name is Jenny Huang. I'm a PhD candidate from Tsinghua University of Shanghai, and right now also working as a research assistant in the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And in the year 2011, I had the honor to work in the office of Vision and Technical Cooperation Division in UN Habitat, right outside of the office of Mr. Baliani here. And from then on, I've been traveling back and forth between China and Kenya and worked for several projects in Kenya, as well as researches. So in the beginning of 2014, I worked together with the Research Center of Urban China magazine, and as well as this Go West project team, which was funded by two researchers from Holland who are based in Shanghai. And we did a special issue of Urban China magazine, which is called Chinese Urbanism in Africa. This is actually a very interesting cover design because in the middle it's a African map cut off from this paper, and if you flip it over, there's this photo of this gentleman, anonymous worker from Chinese Railway Engineering Corporation, who is working on the project in the center of Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. In the magazine, we focused on different aspects regarding China-Africa relations, For example, from a historical point of view, we try to analyze the change of relations between China and Africa throughout the history, but mainly since the 1950s, as we have been talking about since the first day of this conference. This is actually a 3-meter-long diagram. Unfortunately, I could not present it here, but we sort of managed to analyze the historical events into 5 different periods, and we did also geographical analysis. For example, this is the organization situation in Africa countries right now, and this is the links between Chinese and Chinese companies or Chinese government and the African countries. Some of the data was covered already in Alex's talk just now. But the most contents of this magazine, we were using case studies to sort of illustrate what is happening on the ground in Africa by the Chinese hands. For example, this one is a under construction flyover in the center of Nairobi. A photo was taken 3 years ago. Now the bypass, the flyover is already finished. It's constructed by China Wuyi Corporation from Fujian province, one of the biggest construction companies in China. This one is a railway project in Nigeria, done by Chinese Civil Engineering Corporation, the biggest construction company from China. This is also shown in Alex's talk just now. This is a private development by a Chinese investor, but also constructed by Chinese companies in the suburb of Nairobi. And this is Kilamba Kiaxi, the famous project, new town project outside of Luanda, Angola, by a group of Chinese companies. Constructed by a group of Chinese companies. This is invested by Sanago, the Angola company. And the project looks like this, with a totally perfectly functioning red street light, even though there is no car in the street at all. And these are just, the ones I showed are just some of the cases that you can really see physically on the ground. But if you dig into the numbers, there's still more evidence to show that there's so much going on between China and Africa. For example, these are just some numbers. I wouldn't go through it, but just to name a few, like the US dollar, 447 million US dollar in value, and 1,315 kilometers in length. Railway projects connecting Lagos and Canaras in Angola. And the biggest one is the last one, 11.97 billion US dollars, the biggest single contract for China's overseas contracting work. So what does these numbers tell us? We can say that China is building in Africa, and this statement is supported by data. On one hand, Africa accounts for the biggest share of China's overseas construction market. And the second aspect is the other way around. China is the biggest contractor in Africa's infrastructure development. This is a diagram showing the market distribution change of the Chinese international contractors listed in the top 225 engineering groups. ENR 225 is a worldwide list who is counted every year for the biggest international contractors. And these are the numbers for the Chinese companies, which means that these represent almost the largest projects by Chinese companies all over the world. And you can see that Africa, in the year 2004, has taken, it has surpassed Asia and became China's biggest market since the year 2004. And it has increased. I think in the year 2012, it has almost reached 50% of the total China's international market. And I think last year, during the conversation that I had with the China's Overseas Contracting Association, I was told that the number is now 60%.
Total in real figures,
Real figures.
not percentage but cost. Total value.
That one is really hard to calculate because imagine one project up to billions, you know. So I don't have the number yet, but I think it will be. I'll look it up. Here are some figures down there. This is the opposite way. International contract revenue in Africa, and you can see that China in the year 2008 has a sudden jump with the occupation of over 40% of the total market in Africa, and it has remained around 40% since then. So it's serious figures. But can we say, is it sufficient to say that China is building Africa? I was posed with the question directly this March in another workshop concerning China and Africa urbanization. After I presented my work in a magazine, I was asked by Professor Chen from Trinity University, Trinity College from the USA, and he asked me exactly the same question: is China building Africa? And I was sort of offended by the question, even though that he has a Chinese origin. So I thought, why did I feel that? And I thought that because I think there's a certain political rhetoric behind that question. And also, if we have the simple conclusion that China is building Africa after we have collected this data, it could lead to the typical bias of the Chinese strategies in Africa. So I would like to develop this question a little bit further by looking at why people started to argue that China is building in Africa. And I think the main argument they have is that all the development by the Chinese companies in Africa are done by the state-owned enterprises, SOEs, and they were building infrastructures in exchange to the natural resources. But is that so? If we look at the companies themselves, so if we want to ask this question, is China building Africa, we have to break them up into certain aspects. Some of them are, first, is the entry of the Chinese SOEs to Africa politics-oriented or market-driven? The second question is, what is the impact of the Chinese SOEs, the real impact in local development? The third one is, what are the long-term development strategies of the Chinese SOEs in Africa? I think after we review these questions, we could have a more thorough answer to this question. So I have individually written down some of the answers. I think we can argue about that later on. The first one is that I think the entry of the Chinese SOE contractors to Africa is market-driven. I think the numbers that listed already there has already proved part of it. And if we look back at the figures, actually there was a policy written into the white paper of Chinese government in the year 2000, which is called Going Out Strategy or Go Abroad Policy. But the increase of the Chinese occupations of the African market has increased slowly until the year 2007, when there was a serious economic crisis in the domestic market of China, which means that all these contractors suddenly found their works had to cease in the domestic market. So they jumped out of the country to look for a new market, and obviously Africa becomes the second biggest market of the Chinese contractors. And then in the year 2008, the Chinese government, in order to save the market, the central government implemented this 4 trillion policy, which means that they put 4 trillion more investments in the domestic infrastructure market. And all of a sudden, you see that there's a little reduction in the African market by the Chinese companies, which means that they found that there's something more to do back home. But on the other hand, the African market is still very prospering. So some of them stayed there, and then it has been growing ever since. The second argument is that there is limited social economic impact of the Chinese SOE contractors, or in general Chinese SOEs, in local development. And I think the first one, I think it's natural, it's easy to understand because the contractors, for example, the SOE contractors are not involved in the decision-making process, which means that they have to follow the blueprints which was already designed or decided by other people. The only thing they have to do is to follow the steps and build the thing and hand over the project. And the second argument is that they do not contribute directly to the local revenue. In a lot of these cases, for example, in the railway project, because Africa does not have a huge supply of good quality steel, they have to import everything from either China or from South America. And in a lot of these cases, in order to move smoothly, they usually sign tax exemption contracts with the local government, which means that they're not really contributing to the local revenue. The third argument is that knowledge transfer and talent output is totally missing in the project. I think that's very important here, and I really want to emphasize on that. Because, for example, last year when I was in Nairobi, one of the Chinese investors found me asking me to write a report on land issues in Kenya. And I was working as an architect, and they assumed that I have the knowledge enough to give an output of that. But the most important thing is that they have nobody to turn to if the Chinese companies really want to know, to have sophisticated analysis of the local market, and they wanted to know what's going on in the ground. And they do not trust either the Western way or the local consultant in a sense of the Chinese companies. They really want somebody to communicate with them in a good way. And in comparison, for example, there's a Japanese international cooperation agency, as known as JICA. JICA has been building, or say funding, and sending expats to various African cities to do researches locally, and they also sent 2 expats to Nairobi City Council in order to bring out this metropolitan plan for Nairobi for the year 2018. And I think if that's going to work, that's going to be the first implemented urban plan ever since the 1946 British version for the city of Nairobi. And if you think about that, the impact of that kind of input, I think China has really a lot to do about that. And the last argument is the lack of PR management. And I think this is also because of the lack of communication tools and equipments. This is leading to negative images. For example, I think the most famous one is in the labor policies in Africa. This is a photo taken in the middle of the Nairobi-Mombasa railway project done by Chinese Road and Bridge, also one of the large companies in Chinese contracting companies. And you can see that all the laborers dressing in blue are the local workers, and the 2 sitting, one is teaching the others how to handle things, and the other one above on the second floor is Chinese. And you can tell it's a Chinese company immediately because on the banner it says, "Constructed, you're satisfied," and I don't know what it means at all. And this is a worker hired locally to give instructions to the crane. And yeah, probably. And if you know about construction work, this is actually a very important position for the working team, because he's deciding where the crane should go. And there's this female excavator driver, also hired locally, which is rare because in China I haven't seen a female excavator driver myself, but in Kenya there were hiring ones. But these are just random photos taken by some of my Chinese friends who work on the site and who happen to know how to photograph. But this is not covered at all by any media because they don't know any skills about PR management. On the contrary, I think there's a report done in 2011 by the Ethnic Study Center in South Africa. The interviewee said that the result is that 55% of the interviewees have the impressions that Chinese companies does not hire any of the local employee at all. So this is both not true and impossible. If you think about it, it's impossible to deliver any work only by Chinese workers, partly because it's a very labor-intensive work in contracting projects. The second thing is that most of the African countries in recent years, they have increased their working visa especially for Chinese workers. In Kenya alone, every year it costs 200,000 shillings a year, which is more than 2,000 US dollars a year for a single working visa for a year. And imagine all these companies, they're hiring at least 100 Chinese technicals from China to do different works in Kenya and other countries. And imagine the cost of them for just for the visa cost. And the third argument is that the Chinese SOEs are short of transnational management strategies and are facing growth dilemma. That is, even though that they are the moving into Africa activity is growth oriented. But it's natural. If you look at the ENR 225 list, most of the companies from Europe or from America are like 100 years old. But for the Chinese companies, they're relatively young. Most of the companies, or all the Chinese companies, they are founded after 1950s. And they didn't become a company until 1993 when the company law was established in China. So it's very natural. They haven't got the time or experience to develop any transnational management strategies. And this leads to disasters. For example, the fierce competitions between Chinese companies often lead to pricing wars, and this is, I think, often heard in Africa. And the second is the debt financing scheme makes it hard to maintain healthy cash flows. Last year, I heard about this WE company. They complained that the government hasn't been able to deliver the debt for a constant 5 years, so they were in debt almost $700 million US dollars now. So if they could not succeed in collecting all the debts in 2 years, they have to maybe retreat from the Kenyan market. Third is that the instability in local politics could make it hard to deliver projects on time or maybe seize the projects. It has happened in Sri Lanka recently, it has happened in Mexico, it could have happened in Africa. And the copy-paste of domestic model leads to forced management system in a different continent. For example, the junior managers in the Chinese companies, they're usually taking a 2 to 4 year term to their subsidiary in African locations. And this is, so they always focus on the development, which is 2 to 4 years. And this is then, they would think less about the long-term impact of the projects instead, because this 2 to 4 years of experiences and achievements would be the only benchmark for them to get back to China, to the headquarters, and get promoted. So the conclusions are very simple. China is playing a significant role in building Africa's infrastructure through its SOEs, but this does not reflect its political ambitions to shape Africa's future. I don't say that because it's humiliated to do it in a political way, but I'm saying that it is time to use some strategy to plan ahead of time about what we were doing. The SOE's tremendous expansion in Africa was mainly market-driven, and the SOEs need to remodel their development strategies in Africa and involve both Chinese and African expertise to deliver projects in a smarter way. And I want to end my presentation with a small conversation I had with an officer in the immigration office in Canada, because I was entering in Toronto, and this lady asked me, what are you doing here? I showed her the invitation letter, and she said, you know, is China building in Africa? This is an interesting topic. You know what I think? I don't know about Africa, but I think China is building Canada. And I said, why? And she said, you know, if you go into Toronto, you know, you see all these communities built by the Chinese, and you see Chinese working there, but they don't talk to each other, and they don't talk to the rest of the city. And if you, I'm not complaining or I'm not criticizing particularly, that's what she said. I just want, you know, after 10 or 15 years, when people think of the city of Toronto, we have to have some identity of our own. It's not sections of different identities. I want the city of Toronto to have its own identity, and that's very important in the urbanization process. And I think I agree with her. If we want something to be done with its own identity, we have really to think before we take any actions. And it's time to think about that for the Chinese in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zengli. Definitely, I think it is a very, very interesting ending of your presentation. But whether we like it or not, we are now more and more living in the global world. China is China, Africa is China, but China is China, Africa is Africa. But whether we like it or not, things are going on. Yes, there will have to be some way. And I think over the last 10 years, your graphics have been very telling. I mean, the cutoff was really 2007, 2008. It has only been 7 years. And you can see the tremendous effort that has been done. But it is a learning process. It's a learning curve, as you said. Many companies operating in the world has 100 years. China has only maybe 15 years in Africa, 20 years in Africa, and I think it is coming up. The discussion will tell us. Now let me quickly move into the next presentation. Thank you very much for that one. Let's move to the next one, which is to invite Tonton Mundele to come up. Tonton is actually in the Peking University, and his presentation is asking the question, urbanization in Africa, what lessons can we learn from China? I think that will be also another interesting presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity. So I actually graduated from Peking University, but now I'm based here in Ottawa. So I'm doing independent research with some teacher professor here at the University of Ottawa. I'm also working in the private. So this is actually my
Originally from where?
from Congo.
Which Congo?
Democratic Congo.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is actually what I'm going to present. So my background is in economics. So I'll be telling you a little bit more what the economics suggests about urbanization. So there's, the term you see there, I don't want you to be confused for that. It just means that there's positive correlation between urbanization and economic development and growth. But also urbanization through agglomeration economics also requires, health firms to match the unique requirement for labor or material input and premises, because markets are larger, and this is more of choice available for them. It's also another way to have connectivity or to customers and suppliers through more frequent transport links. Urbanization also enables people and firms to compete, and also collaborate. That attracts capital and talent, and also generate growth from within. So urbanization can fuel industrialization, as you can see in China. So because the most of strategies in China is being proactive, so the government tend to come up with some planning, and then they try to push people and companies to go and follow up. And finally, but not least, urbanization also leads to poverty reduction and transform the standard of living of people, which is very important for not just Africa, China, but also the world itself. And we have to consider the new trend of urbanization by considering also the environmental issues. So, and this is now China's. I'm not going to talk too much about this because we've been talking about this, but we all know that China has, many years, like less than 50 years, it was very poor, and also just by 2011, so they reached a milestone by reaching more than 50% of population living, in the cities. This is 20% up from the level in 1980s, and also urbanization in China has strengthened jobs. and creation also in the cities, so which is very important. So you can see in most of cities now, our urbanization, people are moving and they're having more job, and there is also more competition because there are more people coming there. And average household income in Chinese cities are now almost 3 times in rural times, which makes sense. So people are not moving just to big cities, not just to hang around, but actually they're getting higher income, which is very good for them. And also another thing we should emphasize on that is the commitment of the Chinese government or local people, local government. We know that there is no perfect, solution or strategy for urbanization or even for economic growth, because many people can argue, say that the policy in China is coming from the top to the bottom, while some other developed country would like, this the policy coming from the bottom to the top. But overall, what you're gonna see is the outcome of the policy, what it brings to the people, and how effective is it. And we all can agree that China has been doing very well. So this is what I can say. But on the African side, we know that 50%, more than 50% of people are living in rural areas, and more people are willing to move to big cities. But this, that's a very important point, but because sometimes we think that people have the same motive for moving to the cities, but for Africans, most likely people living willing to move to the city because they want to improve their life, they want good education. If you go in the countryside, there are some other provinces in many African countries, you not find any university. So once you got your high school done, so you have to go to the big city to have your university. And sometimes even in some local area, remote area, they are not even high school. Kids have to walk for like 10 kilometers, every morning to go to school. Even in high school, primary school, and then they have to come back. So this is not something that, if you're a parent or if you're living somewhere, you want your kids to have a good condition. So people going also because they will know that in capital city, and when I'm talking about, big cities in Africa, most of the time people look at the capital city. Or there are also some other major cities like provinces, but we all focus on capital cities because that's where people think that they are more focused, and the government is trying to build because they want to show the world they can welcome people, authorities coming from all around the world, and then they're neglecting some other city. So, and then they were looking for infrastructure. I know because I can tell my personal experience because I know I've been living in capital city. I'm originally from the Congo. And then, sometimes I talk to my uncle when I was too small, a kid. And then they're, in the country, a remote area, and then they'll say, oh, they talk to my dad, can you help me to come to, bring me to just why? Because I also want to see electricity because he's never seen electricity. I also want to see, to listen to radio because, there's no electricity there. They have to buy a battery for that. And then after a couple of hours, it's done. And then they can't listen. And then they want to watch TV. So this is, some of the basic things that we can find everywhere, but which we don't. And people can say, okay, I don't mind that. I'm not going to find a job in a big city, but I'm going because I want also to be modernized. So, and also, it's also, as I said, in line that it's also a discovery for most of people, like many Africans also are dreaming to say, oh, I want to go to Europe, I want to go to North America. As we can see also some immigrants, we can see, the issue of immigration in European Union because people are just trying to, do the best if you want to move, and they think that that's the best way to do that. And that brings also, because so many problems that brings, so urbanization brings strong anti-urban sentiment from the government, the officials, because they're also afraid of social tensions. If it's overpopulated in the big cities, so there'll be tension, and also people getting educated and watching TV, they can demonstrate when there is something wrong. And as what some of the people have presented yesterday, they say, okay, why this money? Why the government is not governing well? So it can bring also unrest. So this is not something that many local government are willing to see, so that's why they are not trying to do so much about that. But also overcrowding, breakdown of traditional family structure, because you go in these big cities, for example, for some in some other areas, in Africa, so a child, a girl cannot get put. I mean, they shorts here. They have to be very long, very traditional. And then if they go to the city, and then they cannot do anything. So it's a cultural shock also for some parents or for some families. So that's why some other local government. So these are some of the consequences of having people moving to the big cities. So we have unemployment because people are coming to Myanmar, and there's lack of infrastructures. I know in Kinshasa, the University of Kinshasa, in the first year of medicine school, they have 1,500 students. Can you just imagine that? Even if you're a super professor, how can you teach 1,500? And then there are people, even students, because initially the logo was constructed for maybe 100 or 200 students, and then because they are now under $1,500 out of 5,000 people students, so there are some other students standing outside, and then they have to put some microphone and some speakers outside. So, and then there is a lot of distraction. So you can imagine. So that can even affect the quality of education in the city. So and yeah. So and then we have also housing problem. We have poor sanitary, and you can see in Africa there also diseases. As you can see, there's also agricultural supply drop because many of African countries living with agriculture, and then if people have to move to the big cities, and then who's gonna supply? So and then that's a problem. So and then also most of the road infrastructures we have been built by former colonial powers, and then after that, because everything's getting large population, so the government are trying to expand the road instead of creating other roads. So now, as I told you at the beginning, I talked about the theory, the economic theory. So as I compare with that, so we can see that even if there is a large population, but there is no, there's a very little reduction in aggregate poverty in Africa, as opposed in China, where you see urbanization or also migration of people or citizens from rural area to big cities, creating reduction in poverty. And also, as we can see that in 20 years, more than 200 million people in China have been left out of poverty, but which is not the case in Africa. But also there is negative correlation between level of urbanization and economic development. So this is something, and then the links between urbanization and income are very weak in Africa, and also, as I said, anti-urbanism. So these are the new trends. So I have Chinese FID, so we can all see that. But most of these have been backed up by some of the deals that China is planning with some African companies and my colleague, I forgot the name, sorry. So yeah, she mentioned some of the projects there. And then we can see that in many countries. And so the good thing of this deal that we having between China and Africa, especially the natural resources, or exploitation or extraction. So they incorporate some of the social part of the infrastructure or social development. And then I think this is a good thing, but also we have to make sure that these programs or this deal or this contract integrate the local realities and planning, because China can country which is very good, and one of the goals of some of the negative or the critics that African used to have against some of the Western countries, it's because when they brought the policies, these policies were not, based on the reality of what has been happening in Africa. And then if you bring a policy without considering some of the realities and also the social factors or environmental factors, so this policy is likely to be not very effective. I'll just give you an example. So one Chinese company went to I don't know, in Mumbashi, and then when they're trying to do the extraction, so they have moved some of the population from where they're living because they believe that they're mining there, and then after all, and then with the support of the government, so these people have been left somewhere, and then without water, without electricity, and it's very far from school. So and then they're weak. They can't do anything. They can't even protest. No one's gonna listen to them, and then they don't even know that you can protest or you can demonstrate when you're not happy. So this is something. Some of the fracture that you live in the population. This can be something good for them, but if you you don't do it in an effective way, and then that will be very difficult. And also, I've seen some of the example. The government is doing giving land where there are cemeteries, and after 20 or 30 years, there's cemetery there, and they say, okay, this is a good place, and then they give land to many people, and then as African countries doesn't have some policy, West policies, and some of them, what they do, they dig. They dig and they find, they make a big hole, and then they put the West there. And then when they dig, and then they find some also sort of, human things. So can you imagine? So these are some of the things that we have to consider because it's negatively impacting the social. So, and then also another trend we're seeing here is some of the FDS coming from other competitors. We have India, we have Japan, which is a very good thing. We should not be seeing that as a negative thing, but as many may see that as a threat or maybe African threat. I think we're living in a very liberal world where we have to go through the competition, and out of the competition you get the best deal. I think so. So and then all these partners have also to find a way to come with a solution with the new context of Africa. So this is a very important part of my presentation because that's what I believe that it can be discussable, but that's what I think that it can be a good thing or a good way to solve some urbanization chain in Africa. So the first solution for me, I believe, it's regional integration. I think that African countries are too small. Cities are also very small, and sometimes there are so many factors, and so it's just not economic factor, but also political will, where our government or mayors they believe that they cannot stay for more than 10 years because urbanization planning, it's not something you're gonna see the outcome after 5 years or after 2 years. You see that after 10 years. So why should I do that if I'm not? And we all aware that African leaders they want glory, they want to see that when they're in power, so that they can see. So this regional integration can help the regional bloc, because we have so many regional blocs, to come up with some policies that can orient the infrastructure construction, but also urban planning that can integrate the whole region. So, and this is something good, and also this can help bypassing the policymaker here. And also we have some social economic zone, special economic zone, as we've seen in China. You know that early in the 1980s, when Deng Xiaoping has implemented what we call in Chinese 改革开放, by creating a special economic zone, and I mean that can also boost economic, that can also boost our urbanization, and this is very important. We can also learn from that. I think if we cannot do that on the regional way, but internally within the country, we can create some special zone, as we see in Shenzhen, Tianjin, also other cities. We have also to have a private sector and also local people implication on the policy and also political will. So by planning, by also having a good implementation, because we have so many plannings in Africa, but we don't see the implementation. That's the good, the best. I mean, that's the hardest, difficult, and also the government commitment by challenging the anti-urban sentiment for them, but also learning from other countries. And as you know, that Chinese, even before doing that, they've learned a lot. Yesterday, a representative from the embassy of China was saying that in Canada you have about 100,000 students coming here to study. And this is knowledge that they're gaining. They're also in the U.S. even more than that. You go in Europe, so when they get that and then they go back, sometimes even if in different ways. So it's a added value for them for the country, and also good planning. By good planning, it takes expertise. The government of most of African countries, sometimes they take people or they in a project not just because they have the expertise, but because they know. In China, they call that the quantity. But that's a good quantity. But in Africa, sometimes it's not really a good quantity. It's sometimes it's a government, sometimes also collaboration with educational or institution, and also local people as well. But also it takes technical skill, the project management, and as well the timing. So also, I think that it's also necessary to have joint social and technical research, China with other countries. So this is my conclusion. I think pretty much it's about what I said. And my last word before ending, I'll say this, because as I live in China and I do my presentation, I always want to talk to speak all the language I can, and Tatia, and which everyone would say. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Tonton Mundele, for your very insightful presentation indeed. I hope that we'll have a chance to reflect upon. I think it was quite interesting to see how also the African scholars are also going to China, learning from there, and also bringing it to Africa, which is quite good interaction. And then I hope that you will go back to Congo, and then you will be also supporting your country after that one. Yeah. I would like to call upon the last presenter, which is Matundu Lelo, also from the University of Quebec in Montreal. Mr. Matundu, you have the floor. Tu dois nous parler des stratégies et politiques de validation durable en Afrique, l'impact de l'implication citoyenne et canadienne, chinoise et canadienne dans les actions de développement. Merci beaucoup. Non, ça, la traîne. Ils sont en train d'essayer une présentation après. Ouais, on n'a pas beaucoup de temps, malheureusement. C'est toujours le grand problème dans les colloques. Too many presentations and not much discussion, unfortunately, because the agenda is very packed. Vous avez la parole.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vais essayer d'être à l'aise de respecter l'heure. Bon, les derniers qui parlent, parfois,
malheureusement,
a le temps, mais comme on a grignoté, donc il faut vraiment que je me discipline. Merci pour votre assistance. Et moi, je vais parler en français. Et étant donné le thème qui a été annoncé, je n'ai pas voulu me présenter en victime comme Congolais, parce que lorsqu'on parle de la présence chinoise et de la présence canadienne au Congo, tout Congolais frémit. Lorsqu'on voit, on considère tout ce qu'on a déjà écrit, tout ce qu'on a déjà dit et ce que nous voyons. Donc, je parle de stratégies de politique d'humanisation durable en Afrique, en me focalisant sur l'impact de l'implication chinoise dans les actions de développement. C'est vraiment de la provocation. J'ai mis action de développement parce que j'aurais dû mettre un point d'interrogation, mais j'ai mis action de développement pour voir si effectivement c'est vraiment du développement durable. Je pense que mes prédécesseurs, ceux qui m'ont précédé, ont déjà en quelque sorte parlé d'un certain nombre de choses auxquelles je voudrais faire allusion. Je voudrais contextualiser d'abord, commencer par la contextualisation de l'exposé. Ensuite, je parlais de l'urbanisation rurale en évoquant ce que nous avons à disposition, notamment au niveau des organisations du système des Nations Unies qui ont mis à notre disposition quelques références, quelques éléments qui peuvent être utiles, notamment pour les entreprises qui mènent des actions en Afrique, au Congo en particulier, notamment au niveau du développement durable, la responsabilité sociale de l'entreprise dont on parle de plus en plus, les objectifs du millénaire pour le développement post-2015, qu'on vient de revoir, de signer le mois passé, en septembre, de l'ONU Habitat. C'est l'un des points qui, disons, nous plaçons cette conférence, je pense, sous les... en pensant au prochain rendez-vous de l'ONU Habitat, pour le programme des Nations Unies pour les établissements humains, avec le rendez-vous de Quito. Et puis, j'entrerai dans le vif du sujet pour parler de la Chine et la République démocratique du Congo, mais en mettant l'accent uniquement sur l'habitat dans le projet de coopération sino-congolaise, sur les infrastructures, voilà, on en a déjà parlé ici, mais j'essaierai de voir quelques éléments. Et dans la conclusion, j'essaierai de faire un état des lieux de ce qui existe, ce qui était prévu, ce qui était fait par rapport aux prévisions, et ensuite essayer de réfléchir sur les perspectives. Lorsque nous voyons cette image qui reste provocateur, cette image, on a signé les accords, plusieurs s'arrêtent sur cette image, on voit les personnes qui sont au fond, qui se posent la question de savoir mais quelle est la part que j'aurai, est-ce que je serai maintenu à mon poste ou pas, et puis on attend. Parfois 5 ans plus tard, on n'aura pas fait le 1/5 de ce qui était prévu. Nous allons le voir tout à l'heure. L'urbanisation durable, stratégique et politique. Ici, je voudrais quand même clarifier un certain nombre de concepts qu'on utilise de plus en plus. On parle de développement durable. Comme il s'agit d'entreprises, je parlerai aussi de la responsabilité sociale d'entreprise. Mais lorsqu'on parle de développement durable, on évoque surtout le fait qu'il faut tenir compte des générations qui viennent pour qu'à leur tour, ils puissent avoir la maîtrise des ressources naturelles. Mais lorsque je tiens compte des objectifs que les entreprises se fixent pour leur fonctionnement, pour les actions qu'ils mènent en Afrique, développement durable, ici, je retiens 2 éléments. C'est concilier l'écologie, l'économie et la société, mais surtout établir un cercle vertueux entre ces 3 pôles. Ces cercles vertueux dont je viens de parler et nous montrent les intersections entre le social, l'écologique et l'économique. Dans l'intersection entre le social et l'écologique nous permet de nous rendre compte aussi, effectivement, l'entreprise qui prend ces actions comme faisant partie de ses objectifs permet à ce que les humains, la situation soit durable. L'intersection entre l'écologique et l'économique permet à ce que la vie puisse être viable. Et puis, l'intersection entre le social et l'économique nous parle de l'équité. Si dans les actions que mènent les entreprises, ils essayent d'harmoniser le social et l'économique.
C'est l'autre côté. C'est l'autre côté.
Ok, en ce qui concerne les objectifs du millénaire pour le développement, j'ai essayé de m'arrêter sur l'objectif 11, où on parle justement, entre autres, de favoriser l'établissement des liens économiques, sociaux et environnementaux positifs entre zones urbaines, périurbaines et rurales. S'agissant des entreprises qui mènent des actions en Afrique, au Congo en particulier, cette préoccupation-là de favoriser l'établissement des liens économiques, sociaux et environnementaux positifs entre zones urbaines, périurbaines et rurales, lorsque nous tenons compte des lieux d'intervention de ces entreprises, figure dans tous les documents qui sont signés dans tous les accords, mais de là à les mettre en œuvre, c'est une autre histoire. Nous avons au niveau de l'ONU Habitat aussi cette préoccupation qui revient, la promotion de la viabilité sociale et écologique des villes. Et lorsque nous prenons cela en compte et que nous regardons ce qui se passe réellement sur le marché, sur le terrain, nous nous rendons compte qu'il y a un fossé entre ce qui est prévu dans les accords et ce qui se fait effectivement. En ce qui concerne la République démocratique du Congo, nous avons voulu surtout mettre en exergue l'habitat dans les projets de coopération sino-congolaise en nous focalisant sur les infrastructures, Donc, le projet de coopération, on appelle projet de coopération le joint venture minière, avec un capital social réparti entre le groupe d'entreprises chinoises, avec 68% pour le groupe d'entreprises chinoises, 32% pour l'État congolais. Je signale que la GECAMINE, c'est le grand poumon de la richesse congolaise, qui produit plus ou moins 8 à 9% du produit intérieur brut de la République démocratique du Congo, avec 60 à 70% de recettes d'exportation, a cédé 68% au groupe d'entreprises chinoises dans le cadre de ce projet minier, dans le cadre du projet de coopération sur minière. Il y a deux volets dans ce projet, il y a le projet minier et le projet d'infrastructure. Je suis intéressé plus sur le projet d'infrastructure où nous avons l'habitat. C'est un projet d'infrastructure qui vise la réhabilitation, la modernisation, la construction de chemins de fer, de routes, de ponts, de voies aériennes, des aéroports, l'énergie, c'est le central d'Inga, les centres de formation, les hôpitaux, les centres d'habitat. Et on a prévu la construction de 2 nouvelles universités, alors que nous avons déjà 200 universités qui, pour le moment, sont difficiles. Je pense que mon compatriote a parlé de cet exemple de 1500 étudiants en médecine en première candidature. On peut créer deux nouvelles universités, alors qu'il y en a déjà qui ne fonctionnent pas comme il faut. Et en ce qui concerne l'habitat, le logement social, on a prévu 5000 constructions de logements sociaux, dont 2000 logements sociaux à Kinshasa, la capitale, et la construction de 3000 logements sociaux en province. Jusqu'à présent, plus de 5 ans après, 8 ans maintenant, la réalisation est toujours attendue parce qu'on a arrangé certaines routes, on a mis un peu de goudron sur l'aéroport, mais les logements sociaux n'ont pas encore été construits et je voudrais souligner ici que, comme vous le voyez, 2000 logements sociaux dans la capitale Kinshasa, qui n'est pas une zone d'extraction minière ni d'hydrocarbures, les 3000 logements sociaux en province, pas nécessairement dans les sites où les entreprises canadiennes ou chinoises travaillent. Et lorsque nous faisons un état des lieux de ce qui se passe actuellement par rapport à ce qui était prévu, nous nous rendons compte qu'il y a absence de stratégie de politique d'habitat dans les zones d'intervention en RDC, bien que prévu dans les accords. Lorsque nous passons en revue, j'essaie de me documenter, je suis allé à la source des éléments, disons, des institutions mises en place pour gérer ce projet sino-congolais. L'Agence congolaise de grands travaux, la CGT, qui est chargée de la coordination et du suivi de l'exécution de ce projet. Nous nous rendons compte qu'il y a des dispositions relatives aux conditions de vie communautaires vivant dans les zones du projet qui avaient été prévues, notamment 1%. Normalement, 1% des recettes qui proviennent de l'exploitation minière devaient être prévues pour des activités, des actions sociales, et 0,6% devait être affecté à toutes les actions qui concernent le bien-être de la population. La non-réhabilitation des infrastructures de logement existantes, et au Congo, comme vous le savez, il y a des entreprises qui sont éparpillées à travers le pays, 2 350 000 km. Nous pouvons, si nous parlons du nord-est, par exemple, où il y a les hydrocarbures, le Canada est présent, dans le sud-est du Congo, dans le Katanga, où les entreprises chinoises, le groupe d'entreprises chinois exploitent le cobalt, le cuivre et d'autres produits miniers, il y a déjà l'existence de logements, des camps qui étaient prévus pour les travailleurs, mais actuellement les entreprises minières ne se préoccupent pas de la réhabilitation de ces anciens logements. Ce qui se passe actuellement, au contraire, on est en train de déposséder ceux qui habitent dans les environs, dès qu'une zone minière est affectée à ce projet, on déménage les personnes qui vivaient sur ces lieux, ce qui fait que non seulement leurs conditions anciennes s'empirent, mais ce sont des personnes qui sont complètement perturbées, aussi bien au niveau de leur vécu quotidien qu'au niveau de leur culture, parce qu'il y a des personnes qui sont complètement perdues, qui n'arrivent pas à se remettre. Il y a des stabilisations des populations locales dues au déménagement, expropriation des terres, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure. Et lorsque nous voyons cet état des choses, nous pouvons nous poser des questions. Mais alors, la présence chinoise et la présence canadienne au Congo, qu'est-ce que nous pouvons en tirer? Je pense que mes prédécesseurs ont émis un certain nombre de souhaits concernant ce qui pourrait être éventuellement pris comme mesure pour l'avenir. Lorsqu'on parle de développement durable, je pense que ce n'est pas un défi uniquement pour l'Afrique ni pour la République démocratique du Congo, mais c'est un défi qui se pose au niveau mondial. C'est au niveau du monde qu'il faut qu'on relève ce défi. Si nous revenons sur ce que nous avons dit tout à l'heure au niveau de l'ONU Habitat, des organisations, des objectifs millénaires pour le développement, ou du bureau des audiences publiques pour l'environnement, pour le cas du Québec ici, ou encore pour Urbana China ou la CGT, nous nous rendons compte que ce sont des éléments qui pourraient servir, en tout cas, qui pourraient inspirer, de manière à ce que nous puissions voir, disons, pour les entreprises qui fonctionnent au Congo, ça inspirait pour l'élaboration de leurs stratégies et politiques, de manière à ce que, au-delà de ce qu'ils peuvent avoir comme gain, ils puissent mener des actions qui pourraient, en tout cas, soulager un temps soit peu, et surtout permettre ce qui était prévu dans les accords puisse être respecté. Je voudrais revenir sur le bas-prix du Québec. Le Canada, ici, lorsque nous regardons ce qui se passe, par exemple, au niveau de l'exploitation minière à l'Osisco, dans le Malarctique, il existe au Québec un bureau des audiences publiques pour l'environnement. J'ai essayé de voir dans quelle mesure est-ce que cela pourrait servir d'exemple pour les actions que le Canada ou les entreprises canadiennes mènent au Congo. Ça pourrait être un exemple, par exemple, pour l'exploitation minière à Kilomoto, où les entreprises canadiennes ont le monopole ou l'exclusivité d'exploitation minière, mais l'exemple canadien qui aurait pu être mis en compte ne l'est pas au niveau de ce que les entreprises canadiennes font au Congo. Irma-Stein, ça c'est un clin d'œil que je fais à nos collègues chinois qui sont ici. Je suis tombé sur un projet à Irma-Stein qui est mené entre, disons, sur la période 2011 à 2015. C'est un projet entre l'Union européenne et la Chine. Des réflexions sont menées sur les tendances lourdes de l'urbanisation durable en Chine. Donc, des chercheurs chinois et des chercheurs européens, qui sont au Centre national de recherche scientifique à Paris, sont ensemble pour réfléchir en essayant de reculer le plus loin qu'ils peuvent sur l'histoire de la Chine, de manière à ce qu'on puisse anticiper sur la manière dont l'urbanisation durable pourrait être faite en Chine. Et c'est quelque chose que je ne savais pas, que je viens de découvrir. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle, lorsque je propose, par exemple, qu'on puisse prendre en compte d'autres acteurs pour la réflexion, notamment l'implication de la société civile, des universités, des centres de recherche du Nord aussi bien du Sud, sans oublier les diasporas, je me réfère à ces exemples qui sont en train d'être menés parce que bon, nous avons ici la possibilité de réfléchir sur comment nous pourrions éventuellement, par nos contributions, apporter de l'eau au moulin de manière à ce que tout ce qui se fait actuellement puisse avoir un point de référence sur les contributions que nous faisons. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle, au-delà de l'intégration et la prise en compte de l'expérience du passé, d'ailleurs en matière de stratégie de politique de développement, je suis convaincu qu'en élargissant le panel de discussion, aussi bien des acteurs traditionnels que de ceux qui pourraient éventuellement se joindre aux réflexions qui se font, la société civile ici, pourquoi pas, parce qu'ici au Canada cela se fait déjà. Il y a un certain nombre de groupes de pression qui sont des organisations de coopération internationale canadiennes qui travaillent en Afrique et qui passent régulièrement au Sénat et au Parlement au niveau fédéral et qui font rapport sur ce qui se passe dans les pays où les entreprises canadiennes agissent. Et curieusement, les Congolais du Canada, vivant au Canada, la diaspora, se sont organisés pour que chaque fois qu'il y a des rapports de cette nature, ils se présentent en tant que groupe, un groupe qui s'appelle par exemple Agir pour la paix au Congo. Ils sollicitent à être reçus, malheureusement, on les autorise à entrer, mais ils n'ont pas le droit à la parole. Nous avons ici, même à l'Université du Québec à Montréal, un groupe de réflexion sur l'exploitation minière dans les Grands Lacs, au Congo en particulier. Plusieurs des organisations qui agissent au Congo dans le cadre de la coopération internationale font partie de ce groupe. Ce serait quelque chose d'intéressant que les compagnies canadiennes, pour prendre le cas du Canada, qui agissent au Congo et qui ont le monopole, surtout dans le nord-est en ce qui concerne l'or et les hydrocarbures, puissent, à la mesure du possible, à partir d'ici déjà, essayer de voir dans quelle mesure élargir la participation et la contribution de ceux qui sont concernés, mais qui vivent ici, mais qui ont aussi des liens avec les institutions locales. Cette photo, je vais terminer par 2 ou 3 photos. C'est une photo qui montre qu'on est dans un bureau, dans le bureau, ça peut être en Chine ou ici, en train de réfléchir sur les actions à mener au Congo, parce que bon, vous me direz, ce sont les entreprises privées, mais ces entreprises privées n'agissent pas sans que le gouvernement canadien le sache, parce que l'ACTI intervient et on peut même parfois intervenir dans les organisations non gouvernementales pour intervenir dans les zones où les entreprises canadiennes sont impliquées. On pourrait peut-être un jour un peu colorer cette table de manière à ce qu'il y ait des personnes qui n'ont pas la couleur ici puissent participer. Leur contribution pourrait apporter énormément de choses. On pourrait un jour vivre ceci, pourquoi pas? C'est-à-dire, au-delà de la photo que nous avons vue précédemment, on pourrait arriver à ceci tel que nous sommes là. Nous participons, nous discutons, nous échangeons. Et le fruit de nos réflexions pourrait permettre à ce qu'on puisse apporter une contribution qui pourrait changer les choses. Pourquoi pas? Ben, on pourrait aussi arriver à ça. Parce qu'on a parlé des populations qui ne participent pas à la manière dont les choses se font par les entreprises privées. Les populations qui sont dépossédées de leurs terres, est-ce qu'on ne pourrait pas leur donner un espace sur lequel ils pourraient, par exemple, apporter leur contribution par des réflexions d'abord entre eux et ensuite élargies à d'autres acteurs, de manière à ce que on puisse, en élargissant le panel de ceux qui pourraient apporter quelque chose, on puisse apporter des changements à ce que nous sommes en train de voir actuellement, de manière à réduire l'impact négatif des actions que mènent les entreprises canadiennes et chinoises au Congo, de manière à ce que le développement, le vrai développement, le développement durable, on puisse apporter un plus dans le cadre de l'urbanisation durable dont nous sommes en train de parler. Je vous remercie.
Très bien, je vous remercie beaucoup pour votre contribution. Je pense que ça a été 4 présentations de différentes thématiques, mais assez riches du point de vue de leur contenu et des questionnements qu'ils ont soulevés, des problématiques qui ont été relatées et surtout des pistes de réflexion que ceci peut amener dans le cadre de cette collaboration entre la Chine, le Canada et l'Afrique. Alors, s'il y a quelques questions, des éclaircissements de votre part, le management du temps me dit qu'on a encore 6 ou 7 minutes, malheureusement. C'est ça les colloques, hein, surtout à l'universitaire. Beaucoup de présentations, on n'arrive pas à faire un débat assez riche. Mais quand même, s'il y a des questions, nous pouvons nous réserver encore quelques minutes. Questions-réponses.
Donc, mon nom.
Donc, oui, approchez.
Non, il a une bonne voix.
Ah oui, approchez.
Oui, c'est important d'approcher parce que je voudrais particulièrement féliciter le dernier présentateur, qui est un collègue à moi. Il y a certaines choses qu'on ne dit pas lorsqu'on fait de telles présentations. j'ai convié Lélo, n'est-ce pas, d'être à ce colo 2 jours avant qu'on ne ferme, n'est-ce pas, les inscriptions. Il a pris l'engagement et plus que ça, sa famille vit en Belgique. Et son épouse est arrivée hier, à Montréal. Il a abandonné son épouse pour venir offrir cette contribution. Je veux vraiment le souligner. Alors, par rapport à ce que vous avez indiqué, j'ai une petite question pour vous. Les projets, les réflexions académiques, scientifiques, d'experts, les projets qu'on propose au gouvernement, à l'univers en l'occurrence, vous avez employé le mot attendre. Quand on continue à attendre, 1 an, 5 ans, 2 ans, 5 ans, on attend pas. Ça veut dire qu'il y a quelque chose qui bloque quelque part. C'est quoi le blocage? 1. Et de 2, qu'est-ce qui bloque? Et de 2, pensez-vous que ce genre de réflexion académique, universitaire, d'experts, peuvent permettre, n'est-ce pas, de débloquer ce qui bloque?
Merci beaucoup. Merci pour la question. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres réflexions avant que l'on ne passe la parole aux intervenants? D'autres questions, please?
I have a question, a very short one.
Please.
Because I actually did enjoy your talk about Sengli. I just want to, you missed that, I don't know if you speak French, do you? Okay, so it's exactly posing different kind of questions that you did. And so what I'm concerned is, what is missing in your presentation? It's actually, I've got some answers here. So, for example, the social implication of Chinese. Yes, you brought some pictures and you show that they're using local individuals. But it's not in all cases. If you look at it in terms of environment, for example, or in terms of sustainable development, there are some very key questions that are missing. So what can we do to address those? I don't have specific one, but for example, you talked about how we move people from places and to give the companies, Chinese companies, to exploit Canadian companies as well. Don't get me wrong. Canadian companies as well. So what would be the best way to address those issues? And for Chinese person, I'd like to hear you on that. That's a very simple question, but I think both of your presentations are complementary. You have the positive side, and he has the negative side. And he was somehow in the middle of it, trying to find a good way to balance economic growth and government. So I don't know.
Any other question, reaction from the House? Okay, let me give the floor back to Emily and then maybe to Leo. Yes.
Ok. Lorsque je parle d'attente, les attentes, c'est toujours par rapport à ce qui avait été conclu, donc le respect des engagements. L'un des éléments, des facteurs de blocage, par exemple, en ce qui concerne le projet minier d'infrastructure au Congo, c'est le fait que lorsqu'on a signé ces accords en 2008, il était prévu au départ parce que la partie chinoise, donc le groupe d'entreprises chinoises, pour savoir 68%, disons, du capital social, et les entreprises congolaises, disons l'entreprise congolaise, la Chekanine, qui représente les avantages de l'État, disons qui représente enfin, les intérêts de l'État, puissent se contenter de 32%. Mais entre-temps, les choses ont évolué. Entre 2008 et 2015, il y a bien 7 ans qui se sont écoulés. Et lorsqu'on jette un regard sur ce qui s'est passé au Congo, vous comprendrez que les gens ont évolué aussi. Par exemple, du côté chinois, à un moment donné, compte tenu du fait que les garanties que l'État congolais avait données n'étaient pas respectées, le consortium chinois a demandé à ce qu'on puisse leur rétrocéder les 32% restants, de manière à ce qu'ils puissent au moins être sûrs qu'ils rentreront dans le fonds. Et ces discussions n'ont pas encore abouti à ce jour. Je n'ai pas voulu mettre les chiffres parce que tous les chiffres sur lesquels je suis tombé sont contradictoires selon qu'ils viennent de l'opposition, du gouvernement congolais ou d'observateurs avertis en ce qui concerne concerne ces problématiques. Mais un fait est que pour le moment, si je prends le cas des infrastructures, il avait été prévu le déblocage de 3 milliards. Enfin, on a prévu 3 milliards pour les infrastructures. Jusqu'à ce jour, c'est 468 millions qui ont été débloqués, ce qui fait que la partie chinoise ne pouvait pas être contente dans la mesure où le Congo n'a pas respecté ses engagements. Il y a ça comme facteur de blocage. Il y a le fait aussi que et ça a un effet, ça va avec la deuxième question que tu as posée. Lorsqu'on a conclu ces accords, toutes les parties concernées n'étaient pas appelées sur la table du travail, ce qui fait que c'est là qu'on les a appelés des accords léonins. Lorsqu'on est revenu sur la table, qu'on a posé ces questions lors des interpellations au Parlement, il y a une commission qui a été mise sur pied et on a demandé une commission de relecture justement des conventions signées avec la Chine. Il a été demandé à ce qu'on puisse les revoir. Et il faut remarquer, parmi les infrastructures, on parle de 2 universités à créer. La création de ces 2 universités a été remise en cause parce que le ministère de l'Enseignement supérieur de la Recherche scientifique, par exemple, n'a pas été consulté. Les besoins du Congo, le vrai besoin, c'est que les universités congolaises, donc l'enseignement supérieur universel de recherche scientifique, puissent être impliquées de même que le système chinois d'enseignement universitaire, de manière qu'à ce niveau-là, après concertation, ils puissent voir quels sont les besoins réels des universités congolaises. J'ajouterais, avant de terminer, c'est un combat que nous menons, toi et moi, nous réfléchissons sur le devenir de l'Afrique. Et nous voyons ce qui se passe au Canada, par exemple, et comment est-ce que parfois nous forçons la porte pour être acceptés dans des réflexions qui se font sur nos pays, sur l'Afrique. Non seulement pour les Cameroun, pour toi, ou pour moi, mais nous essayons de mobiliser tous nos compatriotes congolais, où qu'ils soient ici au Canada, avec ces difficultés dans la mesure où ces rues de 31 pourraient être interrompues. Je pense que, à l'instar de ce que nous faisons ici, nous pouvons faire quelque chose, joindre nos voix, surtout à la société civile canadienne qui lutte. Il y a des groupes de réflexion de lobby qui travaillent très fort, tels que le projet, qu'on met en œuvre dans le cadre de la table de concertation sur le Grand Lac, sur le Congo, ou encore le groupe de tous ceux qui travaillent au Congo dans le cadre des organisations de coopération internationale et qui sont très informés sur ça et qui apportent, qui font rapport au Sénat et au Parlement. Si la diaspora pouvait être associée à toutes ces réflexions, je pense que ça pourrait apporter un peu plus d'éclaircissement parce que nous suivons aussi ce qui se passe à l'Afrique. Voilà les éléments que je pouvais donner.
Merci beaucoup. Merci pour ces éclaircissements qui sont très utiles, Madame Belge. Do you have a reaction to question?
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe that I missed the big part of the French. I've always wanted to learn French.
It's not too late.
I think I agree with your statement that actually the Chinese practice in Africa, the social integrations and environmental considerations are largely missing in most of the activities. But I think there are cases that we could follow the steps. For example, there's a big company called AVIC, which is the aerotechnical company of China. They are implementing a social responsibility project in Africa, in Kenya and the surrounding countries, which is called Africa Technical Challenge. So they collaborated with the technical schools of Kenya, and they have an annual competition with all the students from all these high schools and technical schools. They train them for 100 days, and then there's a competition of operating on the machines. And the top 3 of the students would get awarded with the employment in the company, which I think is one of the very good case for the Chinese integrations of the locals. And I think it's also an encouragement of training and educating so that the development, the local development of the technologies could become a long-term project. It's not anymore short-term profit oriented. And in consideration of the environmental concerns, I think China in itself is not doing very well generally. So I think we have to take actions in multiple levels. For example, in the government level, I think we should develop long-term policies towards the African-China relations in the environmental sector. I think Tongji University has done a very good project with UNAP already. They're developing an international school and the training of mayors of the mindset of the people who are managing the cities. And I think the second is the activities of the SOEs should be somehow limited to a certain level, and the policy, the central government should, through the Export-Import Bank, should encourage more of the private sectors to take part in the development. Because I think for the private investors, they are the ones who would be more equipped with the long-term kind of strategies to be developed in another continent. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. I would like, on behalf of the organizers, thank you, Liz. Thank you, Zangli. Thank Tonton Mondeo, and then, of course, you, Mr. Lelo, for having come and then supported this panel discussion today. I hope that the note takers will be taking your recommendation and the discussion. And then I thank you very much for your the end this session is adjourned. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.